Hi. So the other day, a friend and I picked up an MFB 503, and the machine works fine. However, it has a problem. The pots work partially. You can increment values, that works fine, but if you try to decrement them, it just keeps going up. Like here, the decay just jumps all the way up to 127. And if you want to decrement a value, it's just very hard. If you spin them slowly, it sometimes works. Applying pressure also kind of makes it work, but also not really. So I decided to swap them out completely. And I didn't find a guide on how to do that, just an article, which also lists the parts number. So yeah, I just went ahead and ordered replacements. You can see them in the top left. And they don't have the right dimensions. Partially because I can compensate that, but I also cheaped out and took the cheaper option, and they are about 3 or 4 millimeters short, which is not going to be a problem. Anyway, opening the machine up. So the display is actually kind of plugged into the front plate, so you need to be really careful removing it. Anyway, quick look at the case. And yeah, the main PCB is just secured using 4 screws, so I just removed those. And then you can just remove the board. Just really pay attention to the display board, because it's really not attached firmly to the main board, and it's clipped into the front plate. So to get the whole thing out, just apply pressure to the LCD's metal frame and it will pop out. Yeah, the front plate is just a PCB screwed onto a drilled out bread box, basically. Okay, so yeah, that is the main PCB. You can see the 4 pots, and one of them is different because it actually has a push button. You can use that to mute instruments or access the second settings page of the bass drum. Alright, so I'm getting my soldering iron out. Wetting the sponge first. And then before desoldering, which I'm going to do with the desoldering station, I'm just reapplying solder to all the pins which I want to desolder. In my experience, it just makes it a little bit easier, but I'm not sure if it's common practice. I think I saw it somewhere, and yeah, it just freshens up the connection a bit and makes it easier to desolder. Doing that for all 4 pots. Note that the ground legs are not actually soldered in, except for the one with the push button. And that is something I will fix later. I think soldering in the ground legs of the pots makes it look up more solid and durable. So I just have a simple desoldering station, and I set it to 420 degrees, I think. Something like that. Anyway, it's pretty hot for a PCB, so I'm trying not to apply it for too long. Otherwise you might damage the pads, which I have done. It happened to one pad for me, but it was a ground pad for one of the potentiometers, so not a big problem. Just be really careful. And yeah, that's them desoldered. for the most part. This is where I actually figured out that one of the ground pins was soldered to the PCB. So I'm applying fresh solder and then went ahead to desolder it. Okay, so still these things were pretty hard to get out. Try to apply some pressure and wiggle them loose, which worked in most cases, but yeah. Sometimes I just had to reapply solder and then use the desoldering station to yeah, do it again and hope to suck out all the solder that was still left on the PCB. I'm definitely not an expert. I just like tinkering around with stuff and also doing some mods. But most of the time it works out. I didn't like break anything major yet. But that happens too. Here I just went ahead to the third one because I was kind of frustrated with the first two. A bit hard to get out. So one of the problems is also that the ground pins are quite a tight fit. So you really need to get out all of the solder and wiggle them loose a bit. Also not too strong because it's still pretty easy to rip off some of the pads. There's becoming a bit looser, but still not quite there. And really try to be gentle. I think I'm trying too hard here too, so there I try to just bend them forwards and back a bit, and yeah, screwdriver was not a success. These ground pins are just way too hard. Yeah, that makes no sense. So what I actually ended up doing was taking a pair of pliers and bend them into place, or rather snips. Yeah, again, careful with the pads. And that eventually worked. I just bent them a bit straight so I can pull them out easier. Small pair of pliers would have done a better job because you wouldn't risk damaging the board. But yeah, there goes the first one. Actually, they don't look too bad. Like, there's still grease in them, and yeah, still they don't work. So they're about 20 mils. The ones I got are 17, so quite a bit shorter. But what's important is that one indented part of the shaft sits about the same height. So here about, I don't know, 6-7 millimeters. That part is actually the part that the cap sits on to be able to push down. See that they're actually quite the same height, except for the top. So the leftmost one is the part which has the switch in it, or the button rather. So I carefully desoldered the legs. it was kind of hard because right underneath there is an IC which you don't want to damage. That would be game over for me because I have no SMD experience and I'm not sure if it's shipped with proprietary code or whatever. It's probably best to be very careful here. So yeah, that's the legs desoldered. So I just bent them up a bit and then I could proceed to get it out. So in this case I decided to remove the remaining solder with some desoldering wick. That sometimes works pretty well, and I think in this case it actually really helped me. So the thing they did here is solder that pot in a few millimeters higher, so there was not a lot of space or a lot of there wasn't a lot of room left for me to desolder because the pins were so far inside the board, so I could barely bend them a bit. And I'll explain later why they did that, why this one is sitting a bit higher. So I can barely get it out. It's still attached somewhere. It really makes sense to take your time here. They decided to just do it over again. In my experience, you actually need that extra solder to make a good thermal connection to the solder that is still sticking to the board. So you'll often see me applying solder again to an already desoldered head. I'm just trying to heat it up. I think that was the only pin that was still stuck. And that also works if you only have one pin still connected to the board. You can just heat that one up and pull the component out, even though it's not the best option. But that was not the case here. The other ones went a lot quicker too. After you figure out how exactly you can get them loose. I think it's just a thing of experience, which I don't have much of. But yeah, I'm just cleaning up the IC that was sitting beneath the legs, and yeah, there you go. Old one is on the left, new one is on the right. Quite a bit shorter, but actually doesn't matter much. The top part of the shaft is actually only for the cap to hold on to. And yeah, as long as the base has the same dimensions, it should be alright. Next one, bending the legs again. good to take your time here. It really takes a while. Left a lot of this footage in to show that it's just process. Also, practice makes this a lot easier. It's been a few years since I did that the last time. The first time I did that was when I modded a Volca modular. Put it in a different case and upgraded it to banana jacks. But yeah, that is all of them desoldered. Okay, so the first one has the button. Here I also had to straighten the legs and slightly bend them to match the position of the holes in the PCB. And I actually had to straighten the pins for the button a bit and pull them up a bit. The connection to the underlying IC is dangerously close, which I first thought would be a problem, but in the end it turned out fine. As before, I soldered that one in a few millimeters higher than the others, so you will have a lot more clearance in the end. And you actually have to do that to be able to still press it, since the others are going to be so recessed that the button part cannot be pressed. Well, ideally you would get 3 matching non-button parts, but I cheaped out and just got 5 of the same, so they all push down. And I will just snip off the legs of them, of the button part, so that's not going to be used. So there I was still scared to short some connections, so I put some electrical tape on top of the ICs, which in hindsight is probably not really necessary. Straightening the legs again. Without doing that, it's really hard to get them in, and you might damage the board if you push too hard. So I snipped off the button pins of the other parts and just applied some hot glue just for insulation. Here I had to clean out the gun. I really like hot glue, it's so easy to work with, and yeah, you can also just touch it. It will stick to your fingers, but much less so than other kinds of glue. And it cools or dries off so quickly. Yeah. That was kind of unnecessary, but yeah, I was just trying if it works again and didn't pay attention. So now I'm just fitting the others in and going through the entire process again. Moving pins for the button. Insulating them. And then just plugging them in. I don't solder them straight away. If I do that, they might not fit into the case again. So what I did was plug them all in, screw in the main board, and then I soldered them in. Otherwise you might solder them in at an angle that might not fit the faceplate. And then you have to desolder it all again, and it's just a lot of work. Okay, last one. In total, all of this took around 45 minutes, but I also took some breaks and yeah, did some trial and error. If you're experienced and have like the best tools for this, you might be very quick. Maybe a 20-minute job or quicker. Yeah, there I messed up. Just redoing that part and then it should be done. So generally, I really recommend doing this, even if you're not that experienced in soldering and fixing things. I would recommend picking up like a training kit first. That's pretty much what I did. Like 2 or 3 small projects. Also soldered a Eurorag module, and that's the point I'm at now. Kind of hard to get that back on, especially with the pots not soldered in. They still wiggle around a bit, and yeah. Here I actually bent an LED, which I noticed after the fact. So after I was done, I opened it up again and bent the LED back, and then just closed it up again. Not a big issue. Just make sure that all the buttons can be pressed, and then it should be aligned. Also make sure the display clips into the front plate. Screwing it in now is important to make sure that you really have the final position of the main board before soldering in all the pots. Okay, one more screw and then pretty much ready for soldering. Okay, so here I'm trying to put on the caps and see if I can still push the button. So the job now is to pull it up so far that the indented part of the shaft sticks out of the faceplate a bit, so that the button can still be pressed. So now I'm just trying, like pulling it out a bit, making sure that I can still solder it on. But you still need a millimeter or so sticking out of the main board to be able to solder it. Here it's pretty much flush. Just make sure that the solder really flows inside. Otherwise you might not have a good connection, or not at all. So the ground pins here were pretty flush. And that's pretty much the way it was like before. From factory they also pulled this one up a few millimeters so that the button can still be pressed down. Also turn off your hot glue gun. So easy to forget about. I think as a kid I left it on once. Nothing happened, but still. I used hot glue a lot as a kid and like made full car bodies for my RC cars and stuff. Okay, first one done. Still presses down fine. And yeah, the other ones are not that much of an issue. You can pull them up just a little bit, but here I made sure that I cannot push them down. That means the indented shaft part lies like slightly beneath the front panel. The spacing of the pads on this PCB is also pretty beginner friendly, I would say. Nothing is too tight, everything can still be reached, and yeah. It's still fun to do. It's not like you have tiny margins of error, and not that easy to mess everything up. Kind of missed one there. Still had a hole in it, but that's it. Just realized that I could have removed the dab of glue. But that's not going to do anything. It's no harm. Yeah, we're done. I'll just close it back up and that's it. What I noticed here is that the screw actually stripped the thread of the case. So I opened it back up and yeah. and I just put some hot glue into the socket, and after that I screwed it back in, and that'll give you at least some security. At least the screw won't fall out. It'll still be pretty easy to strip the thread, but that'll do for now. I don't plan on opening it up again. Just screw it in once it's kind of firmly in there. Don't screw any further, otherwise you're pulling the glue back out. Last screw. Okay, seems fine, so all that's left to do is try it out. See if it still powers on. And it did. And decrementing the values works again, incrementing works. The button works. And yeah. Maybe I should have recorded a demo now, so I'll just do that in post. Here's what it sounds like accompanied by an MFB 522. So I hope you enjoyed it. Maybe it's helpful if you're also fixing up a 503. And yeah, thanks for watching.